everybody, and welcome to this week's From Boxes to Butterflies. This is going to be a fun show because I have somebody very new for me. In fact, we only met on Friday. She is within the newest anthology that's coming up. So it's going to be a fun conversation. Sometimes the best ones are when it's almost like having that very first almost like having that very first DM conversation live with everybody else. I want to go through a couple of announcements first because there's always a lot going on. And you'll see that on my background, I'm starting to show sponsors. You'll see my logo up in the top left, and then you'll see here, I'll just pull me. So you'll see the Level Up, which is my amazing sister, CJ, and you'll see the Hounds of Business. And they're all just wonderful groups to get to know. I also want to talk about the importance of checking on those around us, those who have had something happen to them. You want to be there to support. In this case, I have my amazing sister. I mean, she is phenomenal, Danielle. Her family is, there's some health issues going on. This particular thing is set up with a food share donations. However, I also want to highlight the fact that we all have people in our lives who have gone through something. And while we're often there at the beginning, we're there, it's like, how can we help? What can we do? I noticed how over time, while that person is still going through what could be weeks, months, and longer of issues, it's like we kind of disappear after a couple of weeks. So let's just think about who in your life would be the right people to touch base with. Somebody else I've seen who talks about this, I think it's Cindy Cohn, who says, check in with 3 people every day. So that's another reason why I keep talking about this, because we've got people in our communities who sometimes they just feel left behind. So let's make sure everybody feels a part of everything. I talk about publicity, and while I showed these articles, the only way this would have ever happened was with my amazing sister, Dr. Constance Leland, CJ. It was with her. She has access to premium magazines. And while these are pay to play, she also has discounts, like big discounts. So I went ahead and had her do this, worked with her at the end of February into March. She got me into 6 premium magazines. It was the same article. She wrote them, which it was beautiful what came out of it. And this, being that she is the publicity queen, a publicity maven, that's something you want to think about in terms of your own business, what you're doing, and moving forward. How are you going forward, and how are you getting your word out there? It can be journals, it can be LinkedIn, blogs, all this stuff. So think about your own publicity. And when we talk about publicity, I'll talk about my books because I'm in the midst of another anthology. So now the bottom left book, that was the anthology that we did in March. It was published. The other 3 books, those are my solo books. So Faith of the Butterfly, which was traditionally published by Roanoke Publishing, that is my own reinvention story. Armor of God series, that I love highlighting that one because that is in a storytelling version, a fantasy version, the story of what it means to move beyond boxes and shine, what it means to always be told by others who and what you are, and losing confidence in yourself. I mean, I know this, I've lived this, and then having something happen, in this case, going on a quest that turns into a personal quest to move beyond boxes and shine as one's authentic self. And when I talk about writing, and yes, this is a little bit on the older side, we are now in the writing stage of this anthology. This is my sixth anthology. This is my second one with my sis, CJ, who you see in the picture. I'm so excited. And the authors that we have in this book, we have so many amazing stories. This is such an important topic. Moving beyond boxes. It's everything I talk about. But here, it's that journey to self-discovery. What does it mean to kind of realize that you are in this box, you're labeled, you've got stigmas, whatever, and to move beyond that, box and shine as your authentic self. And the beautiful part of this is each author is going to bring their own personal story, and however it fits, however they write it, that goes in. And CJ and I were doing the editing, and this one will be published. I get to publish this one, and I'm really excited about what's going to happen because this will be published in, well, it's going to be published in about a month. So we work fast, but we have fun, and this is going to be fun. But with that, who I have today is one of the authors in Moving Beyond Boxes. And I am so excited to bring her up, get you to meet her. Just bring her up. There she is. Hi, Dee.
Hi, Susanna. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I mean, it's great in that we met for the first time on Friday, and on Saturday you were there as one of the authors in this book. It's wonderful. But you've got so much of your own story, and what I'd love is for you to kind of give your story, whatever you want, whatever you're comfortable talking about.
Yeah.
Kind of a little bit of your story, who you are, and how you got to where you are, and what you're doing now.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Sure. I'd love to share it. Hi, everybody. So my story, I don't think my story is any, more powerful than anyone else's, but it's my story. And it's a story that I really had to work hard to get where I am now. Really, I have always been the one who tries to be perky, tries to be happy, and then when I would not meet other people's standards, I would internalize it. So I really put my worth in what people said about me. So I've had people tell me that I'm never going to be a CEO, that I'm never going to be able to train people, I'm never going to write a book, just lots of nevers. And rather than taking ownership and saying, you know what, you don't get to decide that, I get to decide that. And now I'm strong enough to where I can say that, where a few years ago, I wasn't. The few years ago, I tolerated, and it's important to say tolerated, because I tolerated being treated a certain way and then I internalized it. And what I didn't realize is that I was giving away all of my power. And I had some, during my journey, right? So I started my journey in 2010, and I said, I am going to go back to school, right? I got laid off. I was like, what else do you do, right? You go back to school. So I went back to school thinking that something was going to change, and it didn't. So then I went back to school again and one more time, right? Worked all the way to my master's degree, and I couldn't understand, why do I still feel awful about myself? I have straight A's. I've accomplished all this stuff, but I feel awful. And it was because I didn't heal what was inside. I just tried to fix it from the outside rather than really taking that deep look inside and looking at my life and seeing different moments where, wow, that was a fork in the road, right? Like if I would have made that different, I would have got here a lot quicker. But then I wouldn't have the gift of the journey, right? Because my is such to me just because of the empowerment that I feel from taking that ownership back. So now what I do is I help organizational leaders do the same. I teach them how to be trauma informed. I teach them how to see their people not just as products, to see their people as, human. And humans have emotions. For so many years, I just felt so dismissed. I would say, hey, this is how I feel. And then I would, get dismissed. And then, of course, I would internalize it and say, well, I guess I just am not worthy enough. I guess I just don't have anything to say then. But then inside, I'm like, I have a lot to say.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I get that, and I like how you put it, the gift of the journey, which is a
Mhm.
nice way of putting it. For me, I say something very similar, but I fall back to something that was first coined by Ray Bradbury in his time travel story, A Sound of Thunder, which is the butterfly effect.
Mhm.
And the bottom line of it, and it's for those who don't know or get confused on which butterfly effect, this is not the butterfly that flaps its wings in Thailand and creates a hurricane in Florida. This is the, if you go back and change anything, no matter how small, in your
Mhm.
past, you will be a different person. Things now will be different.
Yeah.
And is it worth it?
Yeah.
And to me, it's not worth it.
Mm-mm. No, it's not for me either. I'm very fortunate. When I do get down, I really just look at my life and how grateful I am for where I am. I have two amazing kids, two amazing dogs. I have an amazing husband of, almost 19 years. I have so much to be grateful for. My issue was getting out of my own way. That was my biggest issue, is just getting out of my own way and just letting things happen, giving myself permission to be happy and to be proud. All of these things that I, didn't give myself for so long.
Well, yeah, and I get that too, because
Yeah.
how many of us don't get in our own way for some reason,
So many.
somehow? It's so easy to do, but you touched base on some of it too. It's that internalizing. It's, for some, it's that comparison. Always looking at who's, always comparing yourself with other people because
Yes.
of how we see it, but not realizing that what they're going through right now may be the same or even worse than what we're going through.
Right.
It's just we've all learned how to put on a good face, and they look at us and see the same way that we see them.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I love that you start. So you brought up Danielle. Danielle, I love you. But you had brought up Danielle, and and I was thinking, wow, it really is, you know, you never know what someone is doing, or someone's what they're going through. And for me, I went through so much mental health issues, and it was invisible. Nobody could see it. So the only thing that they could see is they saw me through their lens. of their own experiences. And I saw myself, through their lens as well, rather than looking at it through, my own lens. But you never know like how you can make someone's day better. And that's why I say, like, I'm at the grocery store, I say hi to everybody. I'm talking, helping people. And, my son even was like, well, why are you doing that? Right. And I'm like, because it's going to come back to me. And I don't know what that person's going through. And if I could make their day by handing them milk, then I'm going to do that.
Right. And that's, I mean, that's just what it is.
Mhm.
It's that being the person that you want everybody else to be
Yeah.
in many ways.
Yeah. Be the change that you want to see in the world. That quote really, the last few years, really, I've been living by that, because for so long I was complaining about it, right? Lots of complaining, no ownership, right? But now I can have that ownership, and I can understand it from a different perspective as well.
Right. Well, and all have ownership. I mean, for me, I talk about these boxes so much because all my life I was told who I was, what I was supposed to do, what I was expected to be. If I had an interest in something, then I would be told, "Oh, you shouldn't go into that because there's no money in it. There's
Right,
no safety in it. There's no security in
right,
it. There's no." And it's like, and it was all actually coming from my dad. It's like,
right.
do
Yeah.
what he's doing, and then that will be success. It's like, um, I can't do that. I can't
No.
box.
Well, that's generational, conditioning really is what it is. And that's how we get on that wheel of just constant, trauma, constant, just non-peacefulness, right? And we do the things that parents did and their parents did, and so on and so forth. Well, it's 2024. So the world is different, right? The world's not like it was in 1950s, 1980s, even the 90s, right? Like there's a lot that has changed. So it's really irrational to say, I'm going to take that mindset that I had and that was drilled into me, and now I'm going to go ahead and put it into a totally different world. What's going to happen is you're going to end up very disappointed, and you're going to end up probably with mental health issues as well.
Well, but also when I grew up, that was not something that you talk about.
No, of
So
course not. Mm-mm.
so in many ways, I know I can look back at my own story and it's like, had had something not happened at the age of 7 that did,
Right.
then my ADHD would have gone a different direction.
Right.
Because I know I listened to my aunt and I listened to she talks about how during her wedding when I was like 6, that people had to put their hands on my shoulders to keep me still
Mm.
for photos.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the early 70s. So cameras are not going to autocorrect, shall we say?
Right. Right.
If
Exactly.
you're moving, the shot is messed up.
Right.
And you will never know until the film is developed.
Exactly. And then you realize, oh, wait a minute. No, I didn't get the picture that I wanted.
Yeah, you can't go back, not like now where it's like you can look and go, "Oh, wait, you blinked. Okay, let's do this again."
Right. Right. I'm big with that, right? My husband makes fun of me because every picture that he like sends to me, and that's a me thing, right? Any picture he'll be like, "Oh, this is a good picture of you." Nope, I don't like it. Nope. Which again is me relearning that I can have self-esteem, because for so long, just like you, I was told, hand on the shoulder. Okay, calm down, stop talking. You need to be heard. You don't want to be heard, only seen. Make sure that, you cross your legs, make sure that you use the right fork or whatever it is. Just a
Whatever.
lot of rules, right?
Yeah. And you have to fit into those rules, and
Hmm.
you have a choice. You either fit in, and what's the best way of putting that? Basically acclimate to it and just let it be part of you,
Right.
or you go into those rules and you just survive because you know it's not who you are. It's
It's
not
not
what
who you
you are.
are. Hmm. And then you internalize that, because if that is not who you are and you go in and you're a disruptor, you're going to be looked at like the one who has the issues. And then there's a stigma with that. And then that's where you have your shame box, and your shame box comes into play. And then the only way to get out of the shame box is to put that shame down and to just embrace, this is who I am with warts and all, right? This is who I am. This is how I'm showing up in the world. And that is good enough for me.
Right. Yeah. It's just so easy to get stuck. But see, another piece of it, when we get stuck in these boxes, I think some people, they acclimate to it in its own way, because it becomes home, but it also becomes an excuse.
Well, it's comfort too.
It's comfort,
Hmm.
and you don't have control. That's the biggest thing. When you are in
Right.
these boxes, you have no more control.
You do not. You're
Somebody else.
giving it away. Hmm.
Well, you're giving it away, or it was automatically taken. So for me, it's like it began with my parents,
Hmm.
because you can't go against your parents. So
Right. Right.
then it's taken away. But then there's another piece in there too, and that's our fear.
Oh,
So
yes,
it's like
100%.
a person can have control, our fear can have control. It could be a little bit of both, but
Hmm.
usually it's going to be one or the other. And then if somebody else is in control, our fear just kind of goes along with it.
Right. Right.
And so then you're stuck. And for some, I think this is where it turns into the victimhood,
Yes.
because
Yes.
it's easier to just stay there than
Hmm.
to allow yourself to realize that you can take control back,
Yes.
and then do it, go through the work, take the steps,
Hmm.
and know that you can do so much more once you're out of the box than if you
Right.
just stay.
Yeah. Well, the only way that to conquer fear is through it. And that's something that it took me a very long time, because I was like, well, if I just pivot and then go here, it'll be okay. No, you're not going to pivot. You go through it, feel it, and then figure out how to use it as fuel to light your path to who you want to be.
Right. It's and I kind of see it two ways, and I totally get that point, because I know a lot of
Mhm.
people, that's what they do, that's their approach.
Oh, yeah.
For me, I look at it as fear is this seductive voice that is in that box.
Yep.
And as long as it stays dark in the box, and the box has cracks. You can look through it, but fear's trying to keep you away from the walls. It doesn't
Of
want you to see
course.
the truth. So
Mhm.
it weaves a web of translucent lies with a grain of truth. So that if you
Mhm.
do look through the cracks, everything gets blurred except for that grain of truth. So you don't
Right.
see the reality. But
Right.
if enough light comes into that box, if you were to see what fear looks like, you would go running through the wall, because fear is not pretty. It
Mm-mm.
just has a
It's not.
seductive voice.
Yeah. No, I like that. It 100% does, because fear keeps you in your comfort zone. And that's when we talk about like self-sabotaging behaviors, right? Like and when I said I needed to get out of my own way, I was sabotaging myself and didn't realize it, because I was thinking one thing, my heart said one thing, but I was doing different things because they were stress reactions rather than actually sitting, being peaceful, and being able to work through it through reflective work.
Yeah, and otherwise, when I look at the fear, the other thing about it is you talk about how we get in our own way, and fear is what really does that so well because
So wow.
it's really we don't always totally know ourselves.
Mm-mm.
Not at the moment. It's like I can't sit here and think of the things I need necessarily to move beyond a point or to
Right.
or point to the things that are holding me back at something.
Right.
Fear knows everything. Fear has our whole history and knows how to pick and choose that
Yep.
which will create the most reaction that it wants us to give it.
Right.
If it's trying to
Right.
keep us in the box, that's why it picks that grain of truth and it picks very specifically something that's going to keep us in the box.
Yes. 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 That's beautiful. Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And I think when we're talking about fear, I think it's also important to really notice that something that it makes you fearful might not make me fearful. So,
Mhm.
and that's when you talk about that being trauma informed. So, recognizing that, I might, this situation, this XYZ situation may not affect me at all, but let me tap into my empathy and see, hey, Susanna, let me check in with you to see how it's affecting you. Because everyone's going to internalize it different. That's why they have like a pair of twins, and they might look alike, right? But they're completely opposite because they're two different humans. They have two different neural pathways. So when information comes in, they're going to process it differently, which means they're
Right.
going to have a different emotional reaction as well.
Yeah, I remember seeing or hearing studies where, in many ways, they made it sound like, or there are cases where the twins can be very close to each other,
Mhm.
yet that is so much true because they're not having the same experiences no matter what anybody says. They're
Right.
unless they're together all the time and exchanging information constantly like what we're doing in our own head,
Hmm.
it's impossible. And it's so
Yeah.
it is easy for them to turn out to be very similar or totally opposites.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we have twins and they have a really good relationship, so they are sharing information, absolutely. But there's also the situation where if one twin, and not even twin, like one person doesn't have the empathy to see what you're going through, then there's going to be a disconnect, because you're really not going to be able to completely connect with them if there's that lack of empathy. So I think that empathy is a huge part of a part of that as well, because in really saying it's okay to have these feelings. Like I was writing some stuff and I was like, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be happy. It's okay to be excited. All of it's okay because it's all human, right? And I think we forget about that. We forget that there is a human experience, and every human, all 8 billion of us, have a different experience. We all see the world differently. We might have similar stuff, but we all see the world differently.
Well, we have to see the world
We have.
differently. It will never, even for those places that try to get everybody to conform and be the same, it's like it can't happen. It just
No. Mm-mm.
we weren't built that way.
No. Well, I always used to be told, well, you just need to find your people, right? You just need to find your people. Well, okay, well, what if my people aren't here where I live, right? Like how do I find my people? And really, when I started doing, the work and getting out there and going through my own fear of, oh my God, I actually don't have an organization behind me. It's just me, right? So when I was first starting out, so that was pretty fearful as well. But just kind of going through that and saying, you know what, I'm still going to do this, because if I don't do it, then I'm always going to be in that comfort zone.
Right. Well, and when you talk about find your people too,
Mhm.
there's kind of I see it in two different ways now, because I think
Mhm.
about, yeah, there's nobody around me, because when I look at growing up, you're only limited to that
That
which is
community.
around
Mhm.
you.
Yep.
At the same time, another one of my good friends, Sam Sierra, she's one of her quotes all the time is "Find your people, people."
I like it.
And now that you have things like LinkedIn and social media and other
And-
ways to connect, it doesn't mean just dive in and start talking with people, but you will find those ways. You will start finding the
yeah.
people that you resonate with, that that make sense, and they become your people that you can bounce ideas off of.
Right. Right. Well, and I think when that happens too, like when I look at my journey, like I felt so alone. I felt so and loneliness is huge, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
if you have loneliness, then you probably don't feel like you belong. And if you don't have belonging, so really, just of course I forgot my point.
It's called ADHD.
Yeah, does that happen to you a lot? It happens to me all the time. And before I was diagnosed with ADHD, I was like, oh no, I just have a really bad memory and let me just write things
Uh-huh.
down. And now I'm like, I'm probably going to forget it. But
Well, yeah, you have to write it down, but see, that's another thing. I posted about this before. It's sometimes we have to know the box so that we can move beyond the box.
oh, I agree.
And
Hmm.
in this case, it's really you have to know for me, and I talk about the ADHD. Once, I mean, I could go through life and it's like, well, maybe I do, and really it's because of CJ that I ended up getting checked. She's
Hmm.
looking at me going, you need to get checked. And at the same time you're going through this, you can think, okay, maybe I do. That kind of makes sense.
Hmm.
Things, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah.
Yes.
But then once you know that it is the case, because like I know there's a couple other boxes that I probably need to check out as well. But when it comes to it, I can think about what I would do if it was true.
Hmm.
But once you know that that box has a name, that it is true, it actually, I think, makes it easier to move beyond it, because you
Right.
already spent so much time thinking about the box
Hmm.
that hopefully you can take the acceptance. Yes, there's still going to be some emotional. It's like, oh crap, it is true, isn't it?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I call that looking at the ugly parts, right? And really just accepting them, embracing them as who you are. My son also has ADHD, and I'm like, that's your superhero, bud, right? Like you can look at the world differently. And that's what I think too, right? Like that's my superpower.
Right.
I can look at things differently that maybe someone that's neurotypical isn't going to see. And we need both, right? We need all sorts
Exactly.
of people in the world, not just one kind. And when I look back at situations, I'm like, wow, that was my ADHD. Like that, like I don't even remember thinking about that, right? Like it just happened. And I almost, when I was able to do that, I was able to put down the shame, because I was like, well, this is something that I couldn't help, right? Like this is
Right.
something that I wasn't aware of. So now that I'm aware of it, now I can say, I can think, if a situation happens, like, okay, Dee, how are we going to respond here? And really sit in it rather than just reacting. because then when you sit in it, you can reflect. But I think that a lot of my issues came from just reacting, right? Just blowing up and just, and then I felt better, but the relationship didn't, right? Whoever it was
Right.
that I was with. So like there's the healthiest way is to do the work, is to sit down, get yourself a coach, get yourself a therapist, and just have these tough conversations. Because if you don't, then you have to rely on your community, you have to rely on yourself, and if you don't know how to get help, how are you going to get help? So, and if you're in the wrong community, right, you're in a community where you don't feel heard, you don't feel valued, you're not going to get what you need until you remove yourself from that situation, you do the work, and then reevaluate what situations you need to be in.
Right. Well, and another piece to this is like, I don't know why this keeps popping up on my head today, but maybe it's just today's topic. I don't know.
Yeah, let's do
Um,
it.
it's that once you find out, you really have two choices. Once you find out, like in terms of ADHD, they say, okay, you have it. Okay, you got two choices. Option number one is you embrace it and you figure out how to move beyond that box. It's not
Yep.
going to hold you back.
Right.
Option two, you're now a victim. All your
Mhm.
problems in life, that's why you have problems.
Yep.
You can't get past it. You're stuck with it. Oh, woe is me.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, and for that, it's just it's lack of ownership. Because you have to be accountable and you have to hold yourself accountable. And but again, looking at those ugly parts, people don't want to do that because it hurts. It's not fun to go through and look at yourself in the mirror and be like, wow, I failed. And that's okay if you fail, right? And I think that that's the mind shift, is we're told in society that you can't fail. You got to get it right the first time. Well, hell, I'm in trouble because it takes me like 3 or 4 times before I, feel comfortable. You know what I mean? So
Right.
like that, I'm already set up for failure, rather than looking at it like, you know what, maybe that works for you, but I'm gonna take my drum and beat it my own way, right? And like and we'll figure it out.
Exactly. Well, and that's what it is. But I can see where some people will just they just can't see the way out, and part of
Right.
it is because of whatever the issue is, and part of it's because they don't have their people. They don't have
Right.
anyone to support them, to say, hey, I get it, you don't want to be this way, but that's how you are. So
Hmm.
how do we make the best of it so that you don't have to feel stuck anymore, that you
Right.
don't have to feel like you're a victim of it. Find the superpower. and
Hmm.
and at the same time, CJ talks about this a lot too. It's like, okay, for some, especially like with the ADHD, for some, they can do so much. Things just happen and they're
Yep.
involved in all this stuff. And it seems like it comes easy in so many ways, which, I mean, that's part of that
Some
type
of
of
it can. Yeah.
ADHD. But at the same time, they have people coming up to them going, I wish I could get that. I wish I could get ADHD so I could do all the stuff you're doing. And it's like,
Came with trauma.
you're missing the point here, because
Yes. Yeah.
it's not, yes, there, I can embrace the superpower part, but you don't know all the other stuff I had to deal with.
Yes. Well, and I love those videos. So, like on Facebook, they always have like ADHD, like what ADHD looks like. And I'm like, once I started watching those videos too, I was like, oh, intrusive thoughts. Well, I have those every day. You know what I mean? Like, oh, or, say things that, you probably shouldn't say out loud. Well, I do that as well. So, and there's no shame, but I carried shame for so long.
Right.
Right? But there's no shame in that. And I think that that's what we need to get away from in society is let's stop shaming people. Let's just accept people for who they are and embrace the difference, because we're all different and we have to be different. Because if we were all the same, wow, the world would be so boring, right? We need different people. We need disruptors like us.
I know. And I could see I it's fun to see some of those movies where they have that boring boring type of thing until somebody comes in and basically tips over the apple
Yep.
cart
Hmm.
and nobody knows what all of a sudden they don't know what to do, and you've got those that's like they want to go back to the way it was, and those who are like, oh wait a minute, this is kind of fun.
Right.
Let's think
Right.
about something else.
Right. I love it.
But it's when it comes to this, the other thing is to understand that ADHD is a single acronym for a diverse.
Very diverse.
It's just
Yes.
like saying you can say, oh, and this is where I go back into those boxes again. It's like somebody finds out that you're neurodiverse, they stick you in a box of neurodiverse, and they pick
Mhm.
out whatever subset of a subset of a subset of whatever
Mhm.
meets the picture of the narrative that they want for that group.
Right. Yep.
That's so they can paint everybody the same way. When the reality is the neurodiverse box has a whole bunch of boxes in it.
Lots of boxes. Yes.
And it's like borderline and bipolar and
Mhm.
ADHD and autism and take your pick.
Yeah.
And then you take one of those, just take any of those boxes. You think the ADHD box, you can't paint everybody the same there either because they're
Mm.
not. How it affects
Yeah.
each person is going to be different.
Yeah. Well, and what if you're someone who not only has ADHD, but you have other things, right? Like, like bipolar, right? Or post traumatic stress or whatever it is. You might have other things that either do fall in that neurodiverse bucket or maybe fall outside of it. But I think that's really important to know that, again, that goes into you never know what someone's struggle is. You never know what they're going through. So just because it's easy for you to do something doesn't mean it's easy for someone else. When I went through one of my depressive episodes, I have had a few. So with one of them, I just remember my best friend calling me and she was like, well, what did you do today? And I'm like, I've been in bed all day. And then she was like, well, maybe you should get up. And I was like, I don't think I want to, you know? And then she was like, get up. And I got up and I was like, okay, I accomplished it. I got up and then I sat back down. But that was my comfort, right? Like I actually did step out of the box because it was excruciating for me to get out of bed at that time.
Right.
Excruciating. But I did it. So that was a big accomplishment for me. For other people, you get out of bed every day. It's not a big deal, right? So meet people where they're at.
Exactly. And that's to me, that's one of the keys of belonging is to meet them where they're
100%.
at. I
Mhm.
look at that in terms of the workplace.
Mhm.
Meet people where they're at because in the workplace, you want the place to be successful. You want to have people there. You need to have you need to have people feel like they belong there. Because if they
Right.
don't, they're going to be looking for how to get out of there as
Yes.
soon as possible. And and management, ownership, they
Mhm.
might think they're doing fine, but let's face it, it costs money. And this, I love to look at the business aspect of this stuff because
Yes.
when the business owners see the costs involved for
Mhm.
not belonging,
Mhm.
then maybe they're going to be more likely to talk with somebody and start putting a plan together for people to feel safe and feel like they belong.
Right. Right. Well, and that's when like I would come in, right? And I would do that inside work and being like, okay, what makes you safe? What doesn't make you safe? And it's really it's important because if you don't meet someone where they're at, you could cause more trauma, right? You could
Right.
cause more trauma on that person. And I don't know anybody that wants to purposely cause trauma on people, especially leaders, right? So, from an organizational perspective, so leaders don't hopefully want to cause trauma on their people, but if they don't understand how their actions affect their people, then they're going to cause trauma. They're going to cause trauma on the people.
Right. It all comes down to mental health as well,
Hmm.
because when you
Yep.
don't feel like when you're covering yourself in the workplace, and I've seen the studies on this, then the studies that I've seen, it's like 60% of us, 3 in 5 people are covering something about themselves in the workplace
Oh,
for fear of what somebody else, and that's just what's identified.
that's
That's
a shame right there. Hmm.
I figure that it's actually a higher number because
Yes.
there's going to still be a few who aren't willing to admit to somebody because they're still afraid that if they admit to it, somebody will find out about it because it's not as anonymous as it's supposed to be, blah blah blah.
Mm-mm.
And so when when you have that feeling to be able to let your guard down, let the walls down, to not spend energy patching the walls and instead spend the energy engaging with people, putting
Mhm.
ideas out. Because how often do we have an idea and we might stop it cold in the
Mhm.
workplace because to provide that idea might open up a window in our wall for somebody to see this truth
Right.
about it, that we're afraid of what might happen, what people might say or might do if they find out.
Oh, yes, 100%. And that for me goes down to psychological safety, right? So if I don't feel psychologically safe to speak my truth, I am not going to speak my truth.
Right.
And if I don't speak my truth, then you're not going to know that there's issues, right? You're not going to know, and you won't have the opportunity to fix it either. And for me, so I love that we're talking about belonging because it's my favorite. And I really think that if organizations focused on the belonging piece, the D, the E, and the I will work itself out, right?
Oh, we're on the same
Because
page.
yes, absolutely. Because if I feel that I belong, well, I'm going to feel included, and my organization is also going to make sure that everything is fair and that we welcome diversity, right? We welcome diversity because that's what's going to make us stronger.
Yep.
And that's what, when you start with belonging, and then in organizations you have like that hive mentality like we do at Ignite Purpose. What you do is you set people up not for failure, you set people up for success. And then you create that psychological safe environment. So if my one of my directors has something to say, they can say it and they know that it's safe, and they know that I'm not going to go at it with judgment, and they're not going to be retaliated against. How many organizations can say that?
It's what's missing out there is
Mhm.
that belonging piece, and I'm very much in that, and it's something that I talk about as well and look at for organizations, because when people don't feel like they belong,
Right.
you're actually gonna the company may think they're making money. The
Right.
bottom line, they look good, but if people don't feel like they belong, they're gonna leave, and when they leave, then you suddenly have to pay what, at least 1.5 times their salary to replace them.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know the exact statistics, but yeah, it costs organizations more money.
It costs them more, as and then never mind the fact that it could be somebody that was only there for 2 months. Think about, that's a staggering number. Or it could be
Mhm.
somebody that was there for a couple years, knows a whole lot of stuff, and now you've lost that memory,
Right.
those understandings when they walk out the door that cannot be replaced.
Right.
And so you're dealing with that, and on top of that, how are people supposed to feel like they belong when they're worried about when they basically cannot walk into the office, into the workplace, the environment as their authentic self?
Hmm. Yep. Absolutely. That's where that's honestly you pinpoint where the issue is. I mean,
Well, I'll take one example of that
mhm.
is you take the women who they basically wear a menswear suit to go into the office because they think they have to look like the boys and act more like the boys to
Mhm.
go up the ladder.
Right.
Yet to do so is to basically remove the creativity
Hmm.
because just what we wear impacts how we feel, how
It
we
does.
think, how we're engaging with people. I would rather walk into some place with a colorful dress or ruffles than a suit.
Yep.
It's just like a suit is constricting, a dress, everything can flow, the ideas can flow.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Now, there are the women who, for them, they need the suit, and it's like, perfect, you do you,
Mhm.
and thrive that way.
Right. Well, and when you talk about like dress code and stuff, like so there is, this thing where, you have to wear a suit, you have to, dress up. Well, that's really not authentically who I am, right? Like I can dress what makes me feel comfortable and still be professional without you telling me what it is that I need to wear.
Right.
Because clothing is a huge part of your identity because that's your creativity. That's how you decide, how the world's going to see you for that minute. Like I have a yellow dress. I love to wear this yellow dress. And I, it's bright, right? It's bright yellow, but for me, it's like I wear it because that's how I feel, right? I feel bright, I feel shiny, so I'm going to wear a yellow dress. Um, so yeah, so clothes are a huge part of your identity, for
Well,
sure.
it's well, and I'll add one more piece to it
Mhm.
is taking the neurodiverse spectrums, maybe autism, and it has to do with the material and the feel.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
if you're saying that you have to be in the office in a suit and it just doesn't feel right,
You're going to be
it
uncomfortable.
doesn't affect
Mhm.
for your neurodiverse. There's something about that feel that you need something else. You need a different material and you can't get it. And to be locked into something that doesn't work for you,
Right.
it's going to shut you down.
100%. It's going to just push your authentic self down, down, down. And the further you push it down, the harder it's going to be to release it. For sure. I wanted to actually, so you had given those stats about like belonging. I want to talk about the value of friendship too. Um, so if you have a work bestie, right? So that is going if the organization creates collaboration rather than competition,
Mhm.
then you're not going to have cliques, you're not going to have stuff like that, but you can have a bestie, right? So in work besties, so in Gallup, there was a survey and it was 20% of employees strongly agree that they have a best friend at work. So if you increase that ratio to 60%, that's 30%, 36% reduction in safety incidents. And then you also have an increase of engagement. So, why would you not want to have a culture of belonging, a culture of collaboration when it's only going to help your organization? It's only going to
Right.
boost productivity because I can come to work every day and I can work with Susanna, and Susanna and I work really well together. And when we put our heads together, Like there's magic, right?
Yep,
Well, if I can't collaborate with Susanna because I need to be in competition with Susanna, look at the creativity that we might be missing out on. Look at the productivity in all of it. So that's why you have that collaboration and belonging. You have to have it for an organization to really to be sustainable, but also to not cause mental injury on your employees.
exactly. And I see that, having that person that you can trust, because again, the belonging, one of the things that I like about belonging as well is when you have that safe feeling. I think a lot of people, they don't understand that when we feel like we belong, that doesn't mean we're going to start airing out everything.
Oh no.
And I think there's some people who that's what they're
Mhm.
afraid of. It's like, oh, they're going to start showing up with all the tattoos, and they're going to start talking about this, and they're going to talk about that, and they're going to be, it's like, we'll learn this thing about them, and then they're going to be like that.
So
Like,
that's all or nothing. That's what that
yeah,
is. That's
it's
all or
too,
nothing mindset.
but for some people, that's the only way that they can do it as
Yeah.
well, because in a business setting, that may be, they're not willing. It's a risk thing. They're
Mhm.
not willing to take a risk for the greater benefits that would happen.
So why do you think so I have my answer, but why do you think that is? What do you think is holding them back?
Some of it is going to be, um, some of it's going to fall into personal preference,
Hmm.
their own, and it's like, I hate to use the word bias, but they're going to have some biases against certain things,
Hmm.
and some of it just might be, this is the way that it's always been.
That makes me cringe so much when people say that we've always done it this way. Well, just because we've always done it this way doesn't mean that it's going to get you further.
Exactly.
But so I think that fear is a big one as well, because fear is, we don't want to go deviate outside of, the
Right.
norm, right? Because you're fearful that you're going to be rejected, and then you have shame as well. So you're almost ashamed to say what it is that you want to say because you've already told yourself in your head that it's going to be rejected if you're not in a psychologically safe environment.
Well, yeah, and that's, so when I was throwing that stuff out, I'm thinking more from the management side,
Hmm.
and quite frankly, fear is behind all of that stuff too.
Everything. Yeah. Yeah.
And then what you just said, I see that more of the employee side, because when you're in a work environment where you feel like you belong,
Hmm.
you're not worried about people finding things out about you. And so when somebody comes up and says, I heard this about you, you can calmly say, well, whether it's true or not, it's really none of your business,
Right. It's irrelevant.
and leave it at that,
Hmm.
because it's not their business,
Yeah.
unless you have a reason to let it be their business.
Right. Well, no, I love that because I had just wrote about a situation where I was not psychologically ready to voice, what it was that I wanted to voice, and I had individuals who kept pressuring me. So when it did come out, it wasn't pretty, right?
Right.
Because I didn't do it the way that I should have, which was to sit in it and not to react. But when you constantly have people that are pushing you to be vulnerable, especially if they're not vulnerable and they're just pushing you to be vulnerable, that 100% will affect you.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the other thing. Part of belonging is not, I mean, people can feel vulnerable, but they accept each other's limits.
100%. Yes.
It's all in those limits because we can't be totally vulnerable. We are, number one, our own fears are working at holding us back. So the ones who just spew everything out, then that has some of its own issues. However, you don't want to hold it against them either if that's just who they are.
Right. So what if they have ADHD? So many people that have ADHD are oversharers, me included, right? So you have to keep that in mind too. And that goes with knowing, knowing yourself and knowing your people.
Right. So much.
So much. This has been amazing. I'm like, I love these conversations because if you don't have conversations about it, then nothing's ever going to change. The only way that we are going to move forward as a human race, right, is if we do come together because we are better together and we show each other just let's just be human, right? Who cares about everything else? I accept you just for being a human. And I think that you do that amazingly. I will tell you that. Like, you have opened your arms to me. I just found out about this book and you're like, let's do this. And I really appreciate how you show up in the world. So thank you for that.
It's been great, and I mean we've hit that hour mark. So
Right.
if I want you to be able to have any last minute nuggets, if you have anything, and make sure to let everybody know how to find you. Where's the
Yeah.
place, and what are you doing, and how to get in touch with you.
Sure. So to get in touch with me, you can go on LinkedIn. So it's just like it's listed on the screen, Dee Hoch. Or you can go on LinkedIn and go to our page, which is Ignite Purpose USA. You can also email me, which is just d@ignitepurpose.us. Or you can go to our website, which is www.ignitepurpose.us. And as far as any other nuggets, I would just say just be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself and remember that you are the one that's in control of your life, not anyone else. So
Exactly. I couldn't say that any better because that's what it should be.
Yes,
If
100%.
you're not in control, then it's time to ignite the awareness and take that control back.
Yes, ma'am. Mic drop right there.
And that's actually the way I look at it. Awareness needs to be ignited. I used to say sparked. It's like, no, because sparks don't always take. But if you ignite,
Yeah.
it's ignited. It is going to keep burning.
Yeah.
A
Well,
spark.
absolutely.
Awesome. So thanks so much for being here. I loved it.
Thank
And
you.
everybody that's tuned in or is watching on basically Team Replay,
Replay.
then thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.